When people try to control an INFJ, they often expect obedience, compliance, or quiet agreement. They assume the INFJ will go along with whatever they want because INFJs are known for being gentle, passionate, and understanding. But this assumption is a mistake. Under that calm surface, the INFJ has a strong inner world, sharp intuition, and deeply rooted values. They are not easily controlled, and anyone who tries will encounter reactions they never expected. INFJs are peaceful by nature. They prefer harmony over conflict, and they dislike confrontation. They do not feel the need to dominate or force their way through situations. Instead, they choose empathy, listening, and cooperation. But this peaceful nature should never be confused with weakness. When someone tries to push an INFJ into something they do not agree with, something shifts inside them. They may not raise their voice or argue loudly, but their reaction is powerful and consistent. People who attempt to control an INFJ usually do so because they mistake kindness for submissiveness. They assume the INFJ will tolerate pressure. They assume the INFJ will adjust their personality to keep the peace. They assume the INFJ can be guilted, manipulated, or persuaded through emotional force. They do not understand that INFJs are governed by an internal compass that is stronger than outside influence. Their values guide them more than social pressure ever could. When an INFJ realizes someone is trying to manipulate or control them, their intuition activates immediately. They sense the shift before a word is spoken. They recognize emotional pressure long before it becomes obvious to others. Even if the person hides their intentions, the INFJ sees the patterns, the tone, and the emotional energy behind the behavior. They feel the pull, and they respond in ways that protect them from harm. Over time, INFJs learn that not everyone deserves access to their emotional world. They learn that control often hides behind charm, persuasion, guilt, or even kindness. They understand that allowing people to influence them too easily leads to losing themselves. Once an INFJ understands this, they stop tolerating controlling behavior. They take quiet, firm steps that create distance, clarity, and eventually complete freedom. This video explores what happens when people try to control an INFJ. The reactions are subtle at first, then strong, and finally permanent. People who try to push an INFJ soon realize that the INFJ's calm exterior does not mean they can be controlled. It means they are ready to resist in ways that are silent, strategic, and deeply rooted in their true nature. Thing number 1. Their internal alarm system activates instantly. One of the first things that happens when someone tries to control an INFJ is that their internal alarm system switches on. This alarm is not a loud, dramatic reaction. It is an intuitive awareness that something is wrong. INFJs sense emotional tension and hidden motives faster than most people. Their intuition works quietly but powerfully, warning them that the situation or the person is beginning to cross a line. When an INFJ's alarm activates, their entire perception sharpens. They begin noticing details they may have ignored before. They listen more carefully to tone. They watch body language. They observe inconsistencies in behavior. They pay attention to things that do not match a person's words. Even small hints of pressure or manipulation become clear signals that the person may not have good intentions. This alarm often activates before the controlling person realizes what they are doing. INFJs read emotional shifts quickly, and they can detect patterns long before they become obvious. They sense when someone is trying to push them in a direction they do not want to go. They notice when someone uses guilt, flattery, or subtle criticism to influence their decisions. They pick up on emotional pressure that others might overlook. Younger INFJs sometimes ignore this alarm because they do not fully trust their intuition. They may second-guess themselves, wondering if they are reading too much into things. But as they grow older, They learn that their intuition is almost always accurate. They begin trusting the early signs, responding faster, and protecting themselves sooner. This internal alarm also brings emotional clarity. When someone tries to control them, INFJs feel a sudden shift inside. Their mind becomes alert. Their heart becomes guarded. Their trust begins to thin. They stop feeling relaxed around the person. They start feeling cautious, measured, and emotionally distant. Even if the INFJ continues to act calm on the outside, inside they are already preparing their next steps. Another important part of this alarm is that INFJs begin asking themselves quiet questions. Is this person trying to influence me? Are they crossing a boundary? Why do they want me to act this way? Is their kindness genuine or manipulative? What happens if I do not agree? These questions help the INFJ see the situation clearly. They analyze motives and intentions. They replay the interactions in their mind, looking for emotional clues. They follow their intuition until they understand what is really happening. Once the INFJ's internal alarm activates, the relationship will never feel the same to them again. They become more careful with their words. They reveal less about themselves. They start observing instead of participating. This is the first quiet step toward protecting themselves from control. Thing number 2. They withdraw to reassess the situation. After their internal alarm activates, the INFJ's next reaction is to withdraw. This withdrawal is not a punishment or a dramatic exit. It is a natural response that gives the INFJ space to understand what is happening. When they sense someone trying to control them, they pull back emotionally and sometimes physically. They need distance to think clearly, regain their balance, and decide whether the relationship is still safe. INFJs process emotions and situations deeply. When they feel pressure or manipulation, they cannot simply react on the spot. They need quiet. They need solitude. They need to step away from the person who is trying to influence them. This helps them separate their own thoughts from the emotional noise around them. Without this break, the INFJ feels overwhelmed and unsure of what they truly want. During this withdrawal, the INFJ begins replaying the situation in their mind. They think about what was said, how it was said, and what the person truly meant. They reflect on previous interactions to see if this controlling behavior was part of a pattern. They look for signs they may have missed earlier. Their intuition becomes sharper as they analyze the behavior from a distance. This withdrawal is often silent. The INFJ may take longer to respond to messages. They may avoid conversations that drain them. They may appear quieter or more distant. People who try to control INFJs often get frustrated during this stage because they expect reactions, not silence. But silence is the INFJ's way of regaining power and emotional clarity. Another reason INFJs withdraw is to reconnect with their internal values. Control makes them feel disconnected from themselves, and withdrawal gives them a chance to return to their true feelings. They ask themselves important questions. Do I agree with what this person is asking? Do I feel pressured? Do I trust this person? Does this relationship feel safe? These questions help the INFJ decide their next step. Their withdrawal is not weakness. It is strength. It is awareness. It is protection. During this quiet period, the INFJ becomes harder to influence. They detach from the pressure. They become less emotionally accessible. They begin establishing boundaries in their mind long before they speak them out loud. Once an INFJ withdraws, the relationship is already shifting. They are no longer open to control. They are no longer willing to be pushed. They are preparing themselves for what comes next: resistance, boundaries, or complete removal if the behavior continues. Thing number 3. Their silent resistance begins. Once an INFJ has sensed the control and withdrawn to understand what is happening, they begin their next response: silent resistance. This stage is subtle, calm, and internal, but it is also powerful. INFJs do not usually fight control with loud arguments or dramatic reactions. Instead, they resist quietly, carefully, and with steady determination. Silent resistance starts with small changes. The INFJ becomes less responsive to pressure. They stop agreeing automatically. They stop giving explanations that once made them easy to persuade. They limit how much emotional access the controlling person has. On the outside, they may still seem polite and gentle, but their cooperation fades quietly. They begin saying no in ways that are firm but soft. They stop being influenced by guilt or pressure. One reason this resistance is so effective is that INFJs understand emotional dynamics deeply. They know when someone is pushing for control. They can sense the motives behind the behavior. Because of this awareness, their resistance is strategic rather than impulsive. They make deliberate choices to protect themselves without creating unnecessary conflict. During this stage, the INFJ may also become less available. They take longer to reply. They avoid conversations that feel manipulative. They stop sharing personal details that could be used against them. They maintain boundaries without announcing them. Their emotional doors begin to close quietly, one by one. Silent resistance confuses controlling people. They expect a loud reaction. They expect anger, arguing, or confrontation. Instead, they get calm distance. They get polite responses. They get silence where there used to be openness. This absence of reaction removes the controlling person's power. Without emotional access, they cannot push the INFJ anymore. Younger INFJs sometimes struggle with this stage because they fear disappointing others. But as they grow older, they learn that silent resistance is necessary. It protects their peace, their identity, and their emotional well-being. They understand that it is better to withdraw quietly than to stay in a situation where someone tries to force them into roles they did not choose. Silent resistance is a turning point. Once the INFJ enters this stage, the relationship begins to shift permanently. They no longer give the controlling person the influence they once had. They reclaim their autonomy, piece by piece, without drama. They maintain their calm, while making it impossible for anyone to control them. Thing number 4. Their values lock into place. INFJs are guided by strong internal values. These values shape their decisions, their boundaries, and the relationships they allow in their life. When someone tries to control an INFJ, these values become even stronger. Instead of bending or adjusting to please others, the INFJ becomes more grounded in what they believe is right. Their moral and emotional compass locks into place, making them unshakable. At first, INFJs try to understand the situation with empathy. They give people the benefit of the doubt. They assume the pressure might be unintentional. But once they recognize the behavior as controlling, they stop compromising. They know who they are, and they refuse to betray their identity just to make someone else comfortable. This shift is quiet but powerful. The INFJ begins to stand firmer in their decisions. They set boundaries without hesitation. They stop allowing guilt or emotional pressure to influence them. They choose what aligns with their values, not what the controlling person demands. Their inner voice becomes stronger than any outside influence. What makes the stage so significant is that INFJs hold their values with sincerity. They are not stubborn for the sake of being stubborn. They simply refuse to live in a way that feels false or forced. When someone tries to control them, it threatens their sense of authenticity. And authenticity is something INFJs guard fiercely. They cannot be manipulated into behaving in a way that goes against their principles. During this stage, the INFJ's decisions become very clear. They no longer overthink the situation. They no longer question their intuition. They know their limits. They know what feels wrong. They know when someone is crossing boundaries. Their values guide them toward emotional safety and away from unhealthy dynamics. This internal strength is often surprising to people who try to control the INFJ. They expect compliance, not conviction. They expect the INFJ to bend, not stand firm. But once an INFJ's values lock in, they cannot be moved. They become calm, confident, and steady. Their softness remains, but their boundaries become solid. This stage marks another major shift in the relationship. The controlling person begins to lose influence completely. The INFJ's decisions become final, and their emotional independence becomes unmistakable. From this point on, regaining control over the INFJ becomes nearly impossible. Thing number 5. They cut emotional access to protect themselves. The next stage in the INFJ's response is one of the most significant. They cut emotional access. INFJs may still be polite, may still speak kindly, and may still appear calm, but emotionally, they shut the door. Once they sense that someone is trying to control them, they stop letting that person into their inner world. They protect their heart by limiting what the other person can affect. Emotional access is something INFJs do not give easily. Their inner world is private, deep, and sensitive. When they trust someone, they allow that person to see their thoughts, feelings, hopes, and vulnerabilities. But when someone misuses that access by manipulating, pressuring, or trying to control them, the INFJ takes back what they once gave. This emotional cutoff can be subtle at first. The INFJ shares less. They stop revealing personal thoughts. They keep their emotions to themselves. Their responses become shorter and more neutral. They may still show kindness, but the warmth behind that kindness fades. The controlling person feels the distance, but they cannot identify when it started. It happens quietly, step by step. The reason INFJs cut emotional access is not to punish. It is to protect. Allowing someone to influence their feelings becomes dangerous when that person has shown signs of control. By withholding their inner world, the INFJ keeps themselves safe from further emotional harm. They prevent the controlling person from gaining leverage or using their vulnerability against them. Another part of this stage is that INFJs stop investing emotionally. They no longer consider the person's opinions as meaningful. They no longer let the person's moods affect them. They no longer feel responsible for keeping the peace. Instead, they detach calmly and let the relationship shift naturally. This emotional detachment is powerful because it removes the very thing controlling people depend on: emotional influence. Younger INFJs sometimes struggle with emotional cutoff because they fear appearing cold. But as they grow older, they learn that protecting their inner world is not cruelty, it is self-respect. They realize that not everyone deserves access to their feelings. They become selective about who gets close to them, and anyone who tries to control them is removed from that circle immediately. By the time the INFJ cuts emotional access, the relationship has already changed permanently. The controlling person may still try to push or influence them, but it no longer works. The INFJ has closed the emotional door, and once that door closes, it rarely opens again. Thing number 6. They completely remove themselves from the relationship. When someone continues trying to control an INFJ, despite all the earlier signs, the INFJ eventually makes a final decision. They leave. This exit is not dramatic. There is no explosion, no shouting, and no final argument. Instead, the INFJ leaves quietly, calmly, and with complete certainty. By the time they walk away, they have already processed the decision internally. They do not second-guess it. They do not look back. An INFJ's final withdrawal is different from their earlier steps. This is not about taking space or setting boundaries. This is about ending the connection entirely. Once an INFJ reaches this stage, the relationship is over in their mind. They detach emotionally, mentally, and physically because staying would mean losing themselves. Their well-being and their identity become more important than keeping peace with someone who tried to control them. People who try to control INFJs are often shocked by this sudden exit. They assume the INFJ will always stay, always forgive, or always adjust. They believe the INFJ's gentleness makes them easy to keep close. But what they misunderstand is that INFJs stay only when they feel respected and emotionally safe. The moment the environment becomes controlling or oppressive, the INFJ retreats, protects their energy, and eventually cuts the connection entirely. When INFJs remove themselves, they do so with finality. They do not reopen the door once it closes. This is because they trust their intuition deeply. They know when someone's behavior will not change. They know when the situation will only continue to hurt them. Leaving is not an impulsive act. It is the result of long, quiet reflection and emotional clarity. They leave only when every part of them knows it is the right decision. During this exit, INFJs reclaim their peace. They return to their inner world, where they can breathe freely again. They rebuild their emotional strength. They choose environments where they feel safe, understood, and respected. They protect their identity with more awareness than before. And once they have walked away, they rarely give the person another chance to regain control. This quiet, final exit is one of the strongest reactions an INFJ can have. It shows that they value themselves enough to walk away from anything that threatens their emotional freedom. People who try to control an INFJ often learn too late that the INFJ's silence is not surrender. It is preparation for leaving. When people try to control an INFJ, they do not get the reaction they expect. The INFJ does not explode or create chaos. Instead, they move through a quiet, powerful process that protects their emotional world and restores their independence. Their intuition alerts them to the problem. Their withdrawal gives them clarity. Their silent resistance creates distance. Their values strengthen. Their emotional access closes. And if the pressure continues, they leave without hesitation. These reactions come from a deep need to protect their identity and inner peace. INFJs do not want to be controlled because control feels like a violation of their authenticity. They want relationships built on trust, honesty, mutual respect, and emotional safety. Anything that disrupts these foundations pushes them away. INFJs may seem gentle on the surface, but they carry a strong core inside them. They know who they are. They know what they stand for, and they do not allow anyone to take that away from them. Once they recognize controlling behavior, they respond with calm strength that becomes more firm with every step. If you are an INFJ, understand that your reactions are not signs of weakness, but signs of deep self-awareness. You see the truth behind people's actions. You protect yourself in ways that honor your emotional nature. You walk away when you must, not because you do not care, but because you care about your well-being enough to choose peace.